What's up with y'all, man? What's good? Y'all already know, man. Some stories in hip hop get remembered, and so on slowly fade away, man. Welcome to Remember the Era. Man, listen. Believe it or not, it was a time when a lot of people thought Southern hip hop was never gonna be taken seriously. You know what I mean? And one of the biggest reasons why some people blamed Uncle Luke, believe it or not. Now, before y'all jump on me in the comments or whatever, just hear me out for a minute. Now, today, Uncle Luke is considered a pioneer and a legend. You know what I'm saying? Somebody who helped open the doors for artists all across the South. You know what I mean? But back in the day, a lot of people felt like he was doing more harm than good. You know what I mean? They said he was too vulgar. You know, they said his music was too wild. It was, too controversial, you know what I'm saying? And because Luke was the most visible artist coming out of the South at the time, many people believed, he was creating an image that would follow Southern hip hop for years, a bad image that would follow Southern hip hop for years, you know what I mean? But did Uncle Luke almost ruin Southern hip hop, or did he actually save it? Let's talk about it for a minute. Before there was Atlanta, before Houston became a powerhouse, before Cash Money, and even before No Limit, before Outkast, it was Miami. And in the late 80s, one group was dominating the conversation, 2 Live Crew. The group was led by Luther Campbell, better known as Uncle Luke. Now, if you were around during that time, you already know 2 Live Crew wasn't making no conscious rap. They wasn't making no political raps. They wasn't trying to tell street stories. Their music was loud. It was kind of wild, you know what I mean? It was, some people could even say it was funny. And it was completely unapologetic. The records they did became the soundtrack to house parties, clubs, car shows, and spring break events all over the South. But it was one problem. The rest of the country, they hated it. Or at least it seemed that way. You know what I mean? They didn't really accept it at the time. Now, as 2 Live Crew became more popular, controversy followed them everywhere. Parents hated them, politicians hated the music, religious groups hated the music, law enforcement hated the music. The group became one of the biggest targets in America when it came to censorship. People claimed the music was obscene. They said that the music was dangerous, and they said it was harmful to society. And at one point, selling the album could literally get somebody arrested. Nah, that's crazy. Now think about that for a minute. Not streaming, not downloading, actually arrested. Crazy. Some store owners was being threatened. Concert promoters were under pressure, and Uncle Luke himself, he found himself fighting legal battles that most rappers couldn't even imagine, especially, at that time. Now, this is where the whole story started getting interesting, because at the same time Luke was fighting for free speech, a lot of people outside the South, they weren't paying attention to the legal battles. They were only paying attention to the music. And, that created a serious problem. For many people in New York and Los Angeles, Southern rap became associated with one thing, being a joke. A lot of people looked at it as just booty shaking music. They looked at Southern artists as party rappers, novelty acts. something entertaining, but not something to be taken seriously. And unfortunately for Southern artists, Luke became the face of that perception. Back then, New York was considered the center of hip hop. If New York respected you, people listened. If New York didn't respect you, good luck finding your way in the music industry. Many Southern artists felt completely ignored, no matter how talented they were, no matter how many records they sold, the industry looked at the South as second-class citizens, the redhead stepchild, and many artists blamed the image that had already been established, and then an image that was heavily connected to Uncle Luke and the 2 Live Crew. Now, think about artists like Scarface or, the Ghetto Boys, UGK. Artists who were creating serious music in the South. Deep music, you know what I mean? Street music, but even in all of that, they had to fight for respect, you know what I mean? And part of that battle came from people already having their minds made up about Southern rap, you know what I mean? They assumed all Southern music was booty shaking music and party music, which couldn't have been further from the truth. Then came one of the most important moments in hip hop history, the 1995 Source Awards. Outkast they won Best New Artist, and the crowd, they weren't exactly happy about it, you know what I mean? You could hear the boos, you could feel the tension, you know what I mean? And that's when Andre 3000 delivered a speech that would become a legendary. The South got something to say. I know y'all can hear that passion in my voice when cause I felt that, you know what I mean? But those 6 words changed everything, you know what I mean? Because they weren't just talking about Outkast, you know what I mean? They were talking about every Southern artist who felt overlooked at that time, you know what I mean? And all of the artists who felt ignored, who felt disrespected, you know what I mean? And underestimated. But a few years later, everything changed. Master P happened. Cash Money happened. Juvenile happened. The South stopped asking for respect, you know what I'm saying? And they started, we started demanding it, you know what I mean? And suddenly Southern artists weren't just competing, they were dominating. Albums were selling millions, independent labels, they were generating massive amounts of money, and the entire industry had no choice but to pay attention. But here go the twist though. None of that may have happened without Uncle Luke. You see, while the critics was focused on the controversy, they missed something important. Luke was teaching Southern artists how to be independent. He showed artists they didn't have to wait for New York. They didn't have to wait for Los Angeles at the time. They could build their own fan base. They could create their own movement. And they could make their own money. That kind of sound familiar to y'all? Because that's exactly what Master P would do years later. That's exactly what Cash Money would do years later. That's exactly what countless independent artists would do years later. But Uncle Luke, he was the first one. Uncle Luke, he understood grassroots marketing. He understood ownership. He understood controlling distribution. He understood building a movement directly with fans. Long before social media, long before YouTube, long before Instagram hit, Luke was showing artists how to create their own ecosystem. And that influence spread across the entire South. Today, it's almost impossible to imagine hip hop without the South. Atlanta runs much of the culture. Houston remains influential. Memphis is producing stars. And Florida continues creating trends. The South isn't fighting for respect anymore. The South is setting the pace. And when you trace that history back, you eventually run into Uncle Luke. So the question still remains: did Uncle Luke almost run Southern hip hop? Maybe that's the wrong question to be asking. Because yeah, it was people who believe his image made it harder for Southern artists to gain respect or whatever. It's some truth to that, but it's also another truth too. Without Luke fighting censorship, without Luke building independent business models, without Luke proving Southern artists could succeed outside the traditional system, the South might not have been taken. It might have taken much longer for the South to reach the position that it holds today. In some ways, Luke wasn't the obstacle, but Luke was the blueprint. History, got a funny way of changing perspectives. You know what I'm saying? The same person people blame for holding hip hop back ended up becoming one of the people who helped push it forward. But that's my take. What y'all think, man? Y'all get in the comments. Y'all let me know. Did Uncle Luke hurt Southern hip hop image, or did he lay the foundation for everything that it became after that? And if you remember the Uncle Luke era, welcome back to Remember the Era, man. Your boy Sing, man. I appreciate y'all for rocking with me, man. Y'all stay tapped into what we doing over here at South Entertainment, man. Y'all check us out, southentmusic.com. And until next time, peace.